Never.
You know what applique is?
Yeah. Well, it's when you take material and you incorporate it into your stitching. I mean, it's like you lay the material down and then you embroider around it and then you cut the excess off.
That's one way to do it. More professional way is that you don't just take the scissors and cut it. You actually cut the applique, and it has a much cleaner edge to it.
How do you precisely get the stitching around it?
That's what I'm going to show you.
Okay, all right.
So imagine you see all these pro jerseys and stuff that have cloth letters on them.
Right.
That's an applique. That's how they do it.
Okay.
So let's say we're going to do, football numbers or something like that.
All right.
Well, on an applique, you have to have a cut line so that you know how to cut the fabric out. So when we create our lettering first to start off with an applique, you're actually going to use a running stitch as your stitch type to create your letters.
All right.
So we go over to text icon. Let's say I'm going to do So this, you can just watch on this part. Or I was going to say, you try to follow it. It's not in the handout. So.
Okay.
But let's say we're going to use the default 200 millimeters. I think that's 7 inches. So this would be 7 inches tall. So what we're going to do is we're going to create that number up on the screen.
All right.
Because you picked a running stitch, all it's going to give you, though, is just a running stitch outline of the letter or number. Okay. So when you zoom in on it, you can see that's all it is, just single running stitch.
Okay.
And that's going to become your cut line on the applique material, so you'll know how to cut it out. Okay.
So you're going to stitch that onto a piece of material that you're going to use for your applique.
Exactly.
And then once you take it, then you actually take scissors and cut that out.
Right. Or, since you have a vinyl cutter, what kind of vinyl cutter do you have?
It's a GCC Puma 260. It's a 24-inch wide.
Does it read EPS files or DXF files?
I'm not sure.
Basically what you can do is once you get this cut line created, you can highlight it, then you can do File Export to DXF, and that's a vector file.
Oh, okay.
And that'll run your vinyl cutter and actually cut the twill material out for you.
So you can run twill material through a vinyl cutter? Takes a special blade, right?
Yeah, I think so. But all the Rollins do it. That's basically, you can cut all kinds of stuff like that. That's one way. Let's assume you're going to use scissors.
All right.
Okay? So once you get this cut line, the next thing you need is something to actually tack the material down to the garment. So the way that's done is with a satin serial. And on the jerseys, if you ever look at them real close, you'll notice that it's a real light density. It's just a stitch around the edge of it.
Right. Sort of like Dallas Stars or Jersey or something.
That's done with a real light density, like around 1.0. Now, this has got to catch the fabric, so you can't use a real skinny outline. It has to be fairly large, like around 3.5, somewhere in that neighborhood.
So 3.5 on the width.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you can see through it, so you want to use tacking as your underlay, because you don't want extra stitches all through it. And you always want to generate this as a zigzag stitch. Remember, the zigzag has a perfect Z, so it looks nice and clean and uniform. So now I just duplicate the same thing. Now I'm going to do it with a color change, but I'm going to go in here and I'm going to do the same letter, same font, same exact size. Just going to take my duplicate, place it over the top of it. And that's going to give me my tack down.
That does look sharp.
Yeah. when you zoom in on it, see how you can see the shading and stuff?
Yep. Okay.
So that's what's actually going to sew and attach that to your fabric.
Question is you cut this out and you set it down. How do you get your placement right?
So I'm going to go over here in a second.
Oh.
You got to build it first. Okay. Now, if you're going to put a regular satin stitch over the top of it, then you just duplicate it a third time, but with normal density. So it would be 0.16 on the density. You need to make it a little bit wider and put your normal stitching
So
generated as a satin.
3/7 single on the underlay.
Okay. So that would be your normal stitching. That's if you want a full satin stitch row.
Do you get more when you do applique?
Oh yeah. Okay, so this is a 8-inch tall, a little over 8-inch tall letter. All right. Now, if I had to do the same thing to sew it out, that 8-inch tall letter, would have 63,000 stitches in it. So it would take exactly an hour and 52 minutes to sew out.
For 1/8, number 8.
Yeah. So obviously you can see the benefit of having an applique. Now the way this is actually going to sew, you're going to start off with your cotton twill material that's going to be inside the letter 8. You take that and frame it up in your jacket back hoop.
Okay.
And then you load the design. Now, we talked yesterday about if you enter the same number 2 times in a row, it makes a machine stop.
Right.
That's why I put 3 colors in here, even though I'm probably only going to stitch it in 1 color. Because you want it to stop at each section. So if you're going to use red thread, you would enter in whatever needle number red is 3 times.
Okay.
So it's going to sew the first stop, second stop, third stop. Okay?
Okay.
That's the applique feature that's built into your machine.
So it's actually built into it.
Yeah, it's got an applique actual setting to know that if you enter that number 2 times in a row, you want the machine to stop so you can apply your applique. So you frame up the cotton twill material, load up the design, you hit start, and it's going to sew this cut line. Then, because it comes to a color change and it's the same needle number, it's going to stop. Okay? So you take that fabric off and you take your scissors out and you cut out this fabric 8. And then you can hit the embroidery call button to cancel the design. So it resets. Now you take whatever you're going to put it on, your jersey, your jacket, whatever it is, you frame it up and you do the same thing. You start to run the design again. So you hit start and it's going to run that same cut line. This time though, it's a placement line. So you've got a fabric 8 cut out and you can see the stitching so you know exactly where to place it.
When you put it back in, the material you're going to sew the applique on, you do this outline stitch, which was the number 2 thing you did.
Number 1 thing.
Number thing, it's an outline stitch that you stitch onto the jacket, let's say.
So that way you know exactly where to lay the fabric.
Then you lay the applique down on top of that outline so you know exactly where it's going to be.
Yeah, and just use the spray adhesive like you use to make a palette tacky for screen printing. The same spray adhesive.
Right?
Just put a little on the applique. Don't go too overboard though.
Yeah, just give it a light dusting and then just stick it right down on what you're going to put it
Just
on, so
long
it'll
enough.
hold it in place.
Just long enough to stitch it down. So now because the machine stopped, that's why I can place the applique now. Then you hit start again and it's going to tack it down. Then if you had a full satin stitch, you would let it continue on so it would actually put a full normal satin stitch over the top of it. Most of your jerseys, though, just have this tackle twill. Just that tack down right there. That's all that they put on.
Oh yeah, because the satin would be thicker. That's thicker, right? And this is just more of a zigzag tack down. Okay.
It's called a tackle twill stitch.
Tack a twill.
That's how you do appliques. The only difference is, I mean, this is using the lettering, but, you know, if you wanted to do it as a shape or whatever, you'd do the same thing. You have to draw the shape in Corel, bring it in, let it convert it to a run stitch, and then bring it in again as a thicker object that you can convert to a satin serial and adjust the settings. Third time as a normal satin
And
stitch.
so probably the same places I get my heat press vinyl and stuff like that, car vinyl. It's possible that they sell the twill.
With cotton twill, you bet, absolutely.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it's just in this level of software, it's hard to redraw a shape.
Right.
Because you'd have to draw it 3 times. So now if you go up in levels, you can just copy and change the stitch type. So, you know, I would suggest doing it through Corel if you're going to try to do a shape, like a
So do it-
football or a basketball or something like
So
that.
do that Corel and just cut it out, and then come back in here and make
No,
sure.
just
that,
the size of the artwork is going to determine what type of stitch it creates.
okay.
So if you do it as a pen line, it's going to create that 8 as a running stitch. If you bring it in a second time, same size, everything else, but uniform width, it's going to convert it to a satin serial. Then you just have to adjust the settings for it once it's in there. It's going to come in as a normal satin serial. I'll show you here in a little bit when we get into Corel.
All
I'll
right.
show you what I'm talking about. That's how you can do an applique.
All in 12 minutes and 36